The morning sun poured through the cracked window of Adeola's tiny room, painting the worn walls in streaks of gold and shadow. She sat on the edge of her bed, tying the frayed laces of her shoes, her heart heavier than the threadbare fabric of her dress. Life had never been kind to her, yet somewhere deep inside, a stubborn flame of hope refused to die. She dreamed of love, of a life far beyond the crowded streets and dusty alleyways of her neighborhood. But dreams, she had learned, were luxury for people with money, and she had none. You're welcome to my channel, my dearest listeners. Before we continue this story, I want to ask you for a small favor. If you like my stories, please subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. In the comment, let me know which country you are listening from. It gladdens my heart to know where my listeners are based. Thank you. Her small room smelled faintly of damp clothes and yesterday's regrets. The floorboards creaked beneath her feet, each step a reminder of the life she had been born into. Her mother had worked herself to exhaustion for a few meager naira before passing away, leaving Adeola with nothing but a sharp mind, a determined spirit, and a persistent hunger for more than survival. As she brushed her hair in the cracked mirror, she rehearsed her plan once again. To meet the man of her dreams, the one she didn't even know yet, she would have to hide her own dreams behind a mask of servitude. A housemaid, that was her ticket. Not glamorous, not enviable, but necessary. The advertisement had promised work in one of the city's finest homes, the kind with polished floors, chandeliers, and sprawling gardens that seemed almost unreal in a world like hers. Adeola almost laughed at the thought. Could a girl like her really belong there, even as a servant? She shoved the doubt aside, telling herself that the door to a better life rarely opens for those who waited. It had to be forced. By the time she reached the grand house in the affluent district, the sun had climbed higher, glaring down at her like an impatient overseer. The gates were tall and wrought in black iron, intricate swells dancing along their edges. Adeola's heart thudded as she rang the bell, her knuckles trembling against the cold metal. A sharp-eyed woman answered, her gaze assessing, piercing. "Looking for work?" the woman asked, voice crisp and controlled. Adeola swallowed hard, straightening her back. "Yes, ma'am. I'm willing to work hard. I'll do anything required of me." The woman studied her for a long moment, then nodded, as if deciding whether Adeola's determination was genuine or just desperate. "Come in. Let's see what you can do." Inside, the house was everything she had imagined and more. Marble floors gleamed under crystal chandeliers, and the air smelled faintly of roses and expensive perfume. For a moment, Adeola felt like an intruder, a shadow in a world she had only glimpsed from afar. But she squared her shoulders, reminding herself that she was here for a purpose. As she was led to her duties, cleaning, tidying, arranging, the lady of the house appeared. She was tall, elegant, and distant, radiating an authority that made her palms sweat. But it was the man who appeared shortly after, descending the staircase with an effortless grace, who made her heart stutter. He didn't notice her yet, of course. He was too caught up in his own world, in his laugh, his voice, the way sunlight glinted off his hair. But Adeola had seen enough to understand. He was the one, the man who would change her life, if she could only survive this world of polished floors, hidden rules, and silent scrutiny. And so, as she scrubbed, dusted, and swept, Adeola promised herself one thing: to endure, to learn, to hide nothing of her heart, but everything of her dreams. Adeola quickly learned that a house like this was a world unto itself, with rules written not on paper, but in silent gestures, whispered warnings, and sharp glances. The first morning on the job felt like stepping onto a tightrope, stretched over a chasm. One misstep and she feared she might plunge into disgrace. The household staff moved like clockwork. The cook backed orders with the authority of a general, while the butler observed everyone with quiet scrutiny, his eyes noting errors even before they happened. Adeola tried to match their rhythm, but her hands trembled as she polished silver trays and rearranged crystal glasses, afraid the faintest slip might ruin everything. "What's your name, child?" the cook asked without looking up. Her hands never stopped kneading dough. "Adeola, ma'am," she answered politely, keeping her voice steady. Good. Keep it clean, keep it quick, and don't get in the way. Adeola nodded, feeling the weight of every word. It was a harsh welcome, but she reminded herself that she was invisible here by design. The less they noticed her, the safer she would be, and the closer she could get to her goal. The man she had glimpsed just yesterday, with that careless, effortless charm that made her stomach flutter. She found herself constantly observing him from the edges of the grand halls, the way he walked with an easy confidence, how he spoke to the staff with polite detachment, and occasionally the small moments that revealed a gentler side, a hand resting lightly on the shoulder of an anxious maid, a faint smile when he thought no one was watching. Adeola couldn't help but be drawn to those glimpses, committing every detail to memory, as if storing treasure in a secret chest. But life as a housemaid was not all stolen glances and quiet fascination. It was also exhausting, relentless, and humbling. She learned to anticipate the needs of the family before they voiced them, to navigate the labyrinth of expectations and social hierarchy that governed the house, and to hide every ounce of her curiosity and ambition behind a mask of diligence. One wrong word or misstep could undo all her careful plans. Despite the hardships, there were small victories that made her heart soar. When she managed to prepare the rooms exactly as the lady of the house preferred, receiving only a rare nod of approval, Adeola felt a spark of pride. When she quietly overheard the man of her fascination chuckle at something she had done without realizing it, she felt a rush of thrill that made the long hours worth it. She also discovered the household was full of hidden tensions. The other staff had their own alliances and rivalries, and whispers of old grudges and secrets floated like dust motes in the sunlight. Adeola had to learn quickly. Some friendships could save her, while others could destroy her quietly and efficiently. She moved cautiously, always listening, always watching. One evening, after the family had retired and the house grew quiet except for the occasional clink of dishes in the kitchen, Adeola found herself in the garden, staring at the moonlight reflecting on the fountain. She allowed herself a moment to dream, imagining the day she could meet him not as a servant, but as someone worthy of his attention. The thought made her heart ache with longing and determination all at once. Little did she know, he had noticed her too. Not her yet, not in the way she wanted, but in the way the perceptive sometimes notice the faintest traces of courage and curiosity in a person. A smile cast his lips that night, subtle but real, as he looked out the window of his study toward the garden where she lingered. Adeola didn't see it, but the seed had been planted. And as she wiped down the last of the dining room silver and arranged the cushions just so, she whispered a promise to herself. One day, she would step out from behind the curtains, not as a shadow, not as a maid, but as someone who could claim her place beside the man she had already begun to love. Days turned into weeks, and Adeola settled into the rhythm of the household, her movements becoming almost invisible, her presence felt only in the perfection of her work. Yet, despite the grueling hours and constant vigilance, she couldn't stop noticing him, the man who had become the silent centerpiece of her world. It began with small, accidental encounters, a dropped handkerchief in the hallway, a fleeting glance exchanged across the breakfast table, or a whispered thank you when she quietly adjusted a cushion just as he entered the room. Each moment was a spark, a tiny crack in the invisible wall between her role as a housemaid and the heart she was desperately trying to guard. One rainy afternoon, as the storm rattled the windows and the house seemed to shrink in the pounding rain, Adeola found herself in the library, dusting the shelves in silence. She was startled when he appeared at the doorway, his hair damp and his shirt clinging slightly to his broad shoulders. "You missed a spot," he said casually, nodding toward a shelf she had thought spotless. Adeola froze, unsure whether to laugh nervously or frown in embarrassment. "I'll fix it immediately, sir," she stammered, her hands trembling slightly. He smiled, a fleeting, mischievous smile that seemed to linger in the air
long after he left. Her heart raced, but she reminded herself he was still unreachable, still part of a world she could admire only from a distance. Yet, that brief interaction planted something more daring inside her, the desire to be noticed, not just for her work, but for herself. The household, she realized, was a theater, and she was learning the choreography. Each servant, each member of the family moved according to unseen roles, and her ability to anticipate needs, to read moods, and to navigate quiet tensions became her secret weapon. She learned that laughter could be disarming, that a gentle smile could soften suspicion, and that silence could carry more power than words. It was during one of these quiet lessons that the first real spark ignited. The man had dropped a small book, a rare thing given his usually meticulous nature, and it had fallen into the narrow space behind the velvet sofa. Adeola hesitated, then stretched and retrieved it, holding it out to him. "Here, sir," she said softly. His eyes met hers for a heartbeat longer than expected, a flicker of something unspoken passing between them. "Thank you," he said, and for the first time, there was no casual detachment in his tone. Something warmer, more human touched his words, and Adeola felt her chest tighten with a mixture of hope and fear. After that day, the small interactions became slightly bolder, almost imperceptibly so. He would ask for books she had arranged, comment lightly on the weather when she brought in the tea, or allow her to accompany him briefly through the garden when the household was busy elsewhere. Each moment was electric, charged with the unspoken knowledge that they were dancing on the edge of something forbidden, yet inevitable. But tension lurked beneath every smile. Adeola had to keep her heart hidden, even as it grew bolder, and she sensed that every spark she felt might ignite into scandal if discovered. Rumors among the staff, a sharp glance from the lady of the house, or a careless word could undo all her careful progress. Yet even danger only sharpened the thrill. One evening, as the sky blushed with the fading light of sunset, Adeola found herself alone in the garden again, arranging flowers for the dining table. He appeared quietly, not startling her this time, as if drawn by some silent rhythm she could feel but not hear. "You have a good eye for detail," he said, watching her carefully. Adeola's hands paused mid-arrangement. "Thank you, sir," she replied, voice steady though her heart galloped. "Most people wouldn't notice these things," he continued, stepping closer, his presence warm and unassuming. It's rare." For a fleeting moment, the world shrank to the garden, to the scent of rain-soaked roses, and to the way his eyes lingered on her with a kindness she had never expected. Her pulse hammered in her ears, and she knew, with an almost painful certainty, that this was the beginning, not just of recognition, but of something far deeper. Adeola returned to her chores that night with a head full of dreams and a heart heavier than ever. Every glance, every word, every fleeting smile was a spark she could not extinguish. And somewhere, between the whispered corners of the mansion and the hush of moonlight on polished floors, the possibility of love began to bloom. Love, she realized, was no longer just a dream. It was quietly stirring, waiting for the moment when courage would meet opportunity, when whispers would finally turn into words and sparks into flames. Life in the mansion had grown more complicated. The quiet sparks Adeola had felt in the garden and library were no longer mere coincidences. They were shaping a subtle, unspoken bond between her and him. Yet, as the rhythm of their small interactions grew, so did the shadows of secrets waiting to surface. It began with whispers among the staff. One of the older maids, a woman with sharp eyes and sharper tongue, noticed Adeola lingering in the garden longer than usual. "You are getting too comfortable," she hissed, cornering Adeola in the kitchen. "Don't think anyone doesn't notice. There are rules here. Stay in your lane or you'll regret it." Adeola nodded, her stomach twisting. She had known the danger of overstepping, but she couldn't ignore the pull she felt toward him. Every glance, every smile, every word felt like threads tying her fate to his. She had to be careful, yet the heart rarely obeys caution. Then came the first direct challenge. One evening, while clearing the study, she stumbled across a letter that had fallen behind a desk drawer. The envelope was addressed to him, written in elegant script she recognized instantly. Out of curiosity, or perhaps destiny, she unfolded it, her eyes scanning words that made her pulse spike. It was from a woman, someone from his past, claiming lingering feelings and hinting at a complicated engagement. Adeola's hands shook as she realized the depth of the storm approaching. The man she admired, the man she had begun to care for, was not free. His heart and life were tangled in promises and obligations she could not ignore. Her mind raced. Should she return the letter? Should she confront him? Or should she pretend she had never seen it, keeping the secret buried like all the others she had learned to carry in this house? Every choice carried risk, and every choice could break what delicate bond had begun to form between them. The tension mounted the next day. He noticed her hesitancy when he passed her in the hallway. "Adeola," his tone gentle but probing, "is something wrong?" Her heart thudded violently, but she forced calm into her voice. "No, sir, everything is fine," she lied, her stomach twisting with guilt. He studied her closely, his eyes narrowing slightly, but he said nothing more, leaving a question hanging in the air like smoke. Meanwhile, the lady of the house began to show signs of suspicion. She was graceful, poised, yet her gaze lingered on Adeola longer than courtesy demanded. Rumors about the staff's loyalty had reached her ears, and she was not a woman to ignore even the faintest hint of impropriety. Adeola felt her world shrinking, the walls of the mansion closing in as if the very air conspiring against her secret desires. The breaking point came during a family gathering. Adeola was serving drinks in the drawing room when a slip of the tongue from another maid exposed her two long glances and attentive gestures toward him. The lady of the house's eyes narrowed sharply, and the man she admired stiffened, caught between surprise and curiosity. "Is there something you want to tell us, Adeola?" the lady asked, voice deceptively calm. Her throat went dry. She wanted to tell the truth, to reveal that her intentions were pure, that her feelings were genuine, but the consequences of such honesty could be devastating. Instead, she bowed her head, hands folded neatly. "No, ma'am, I am simply doing my duty." Her lie was plausible, yet unsatisfactory. She could feel the subtle shift in the room, the way suspicion had begun to prick at the edges of trust. And she realized painfully that the first step toward love was also the first step into danger. That night, alone in the servant quarters, Adeola cradled her head in her hands. The letter, the whispered warnings, the suspicious glances, all of it pressed down on her like a storm. Her dreams of love were no longer simple. They were complicated, threatened by truth, expectation, and the fragile balance between servant and family. Yet, amidst the fear, a quiet resolute settled in her chest. Secrets might be unveiled, truths might be revealed, but she would endure. She would navigate these treacherous waters, even if it meant risking heartbreak. Because love, the kind that made her pulse race and her soul ache, was worth every whispered danger, every shadowed suspicion, and every secret that might one day come to light. And somewhere deep down, she knew that he too was not immune to the pull between them. Despite the obstacles, despite the hidden truths, something undeniable had begun, a spark that neither secrecy nor circumstance could fully extinguish.
The days that followed were a delicate dance of caution and hope. Adeola moved through the mansion with a careful balance of humility and quiet confidence, determined to prove that her worth was more than the uniform she wore. She knew the stakes had never been higher. The letter, the whispers, the sharp glances,
All were reminders that love in her world required patience, courage, and the ability to navigate obstacles without losing herself. The man she admired, whose presence had haunted her thoughts and dreams, seemed to sense her quiet resolve. Their encounters, once fleeting and charged with uncertainty, began to carry a subtle warmth, a shared understanding that neither dared to speak aloud. Every glance, every brush of a hand while passing objects became laden with meaning. It was during a weekend gathering at the mansion that the moment of truth arrived. The lady of the house had been observing Adeola closely, but the careful attention to duty, the unwavering honesty in her work, and the subtle dignity she carried had begun to soften even the sharpest doubts. The family gathered in the drawing room when a minor accident, a spilled drink, gave Adeola the chance to act with remarkable composure, rescuing the situation without drawing undue attention to herself. Her actions did not go unnoticed. He stepped forward, offering her a rare, unguarded smile. "You handled that perfectly," he said, his voice warm and sincere. Adeola felt her heart skip a beat as he continued. "It's not just your work, it's the way you see things, the care you put into everything. That matters more than anyone realizes." The words, simple as they were, carried a weight she had been yearning for. Her courage, her patience, and her quiet perseverance had not gone unnoticed. The barriers of social class, duty, and secrecy began to crumble, replaced by a growing acknowledgement of something deeper, something mutual. Later, in the privacy of the garden where they had shared so many unspoken moments, he finally spoke the words Adeola had longed to hear. "Adeola," he began, hesitation giving way to determination. "I can't ignore what I feel any longer. All this time, I've watched you work, observed your strength, your kindness, and I've realized that I care for you more than I ever expected. I see you, not just as a maid, but as the person I've been searching for." Adeola's breath caught and tears pricked at the corners of her eyes. I feel the same way," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. "But I'm just a housemaid. I don't know if I can ever." He took her hands gently in his, lifting them to his lips. "You don't have to be anything but yourself. That is more than enough." The barriers that had seemed insurmountable, class, duty, secrecy, dissolved in that moment. Love, it seemed, had its own rules, and they were not dictated by status or circumstance. It was a reward for courage, patience, and the willingness to see each other beyond the roles assigned by society. The lady of the house, observing from a distance, finally allowed herself a small approving nod. Even she recognized the sincerity of what had blossomed between them. The other staff, who had once whispered warnings and suspicions, now looked on with quiet smiles, understanding that love had a way of transcending fear and hierarchy. Adeola and he spent the evening walking through the moonlit garden, their hands intertwined, their hearts aligned. The mansion, once a place of rules and restraint, had become a sanctuary of honesty and connection. Every shared glance, every quiet conversation was a testament to endurance, courage, and the triumph of authentic love. By the time dawn crept across the horizon, painting the sky in soft shades of pink and gold, Adeola realized that she had not only met the love of her life, but had also discovered her own strength, resilience, and worth. She had endured the challenges of her position, navigated the treacheries of secrecy and expectation, and emerged not as a shadow behind the curtains, but as a woman fully capable of love and being loved in return. And as they stood together, gazing at the awakening city beyond the gates, Adeola whispered a quiet promise to herself. Love, when earned through courage and patience, is always worth the journey.